Hello, your Uncle Spurt here, and today I'm having a good old squint at the Moto G06 Power, or technically the Moto G06 Power, if you want to be a pedantic Percy about it. Although, when is anyone on the internet ever pedantic? And the Moto G06 Power boasts all-weekend battery life, a posh Pantone design, and a massive near 7-inch display for your movie and gaming shenanigans. And yet, it costs just £89 here in Blighty. I mean, that's not even a full month's worth of Greg's meal deals. So is it bargain of the century? What's the catch? Well, let's have a closer squint at the Moto G06 Power, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe, ding that old notifications bell. Cheers! Now first up, as usual these days, not much bunged in the box besides of course the phone itself. A USB Type-C to Type-C cable. And Motorola has kindly bunged in a condom case as well, so you can slap that on your Moto G06 Power, keep it all safe from drops and stuff. I'm just going to call it the Moto G06 Power from now on, by the way. Bollocks to the 0-bit. Ain't bothered with that. Now, there's not really any way of saying this politely. This Motorola blower is a big old chonky boy. That right there is a 6.88-inch display, pretty big even by modern smartphone standards, and that's before you even factor in the bezels surrounding it, which are thick with at least 2 Cs, especially down below where you got some proper Jimmy Hill chin action on the go. Thankfully the smartphone isn't horrifically girthy, however, because you've got quite a stretched aspect ratio. Pretty bloody long, but reasonably thin. But it is a heavy bugger, weighing around 220 grams, which is almost as much as some of those whopping great foldables. And the reason it's so bulky and hefty is of course to accommodate the massive friggin' battery that Motorola has stuffed inside of it. Now bear in mind, if you do want something a bit more slender, a bit more lightweight, this phone does come in a just regular Moto G6 flavour without the power bit at the end. That's a bit more slender, a lot more lightweight, but of course the battery not quite as big either. So you've got to decide what is your priority, slim and light or battery life for days. Now, because the Moto G06 Power is a budget-friendly blower, it's not too surprising to see a basic plastic frame. Although I do love that around the back end you've got this textured, fake, leathery finish. It's strokeably soft, a clear departure from the usual shiny plastic you get slapped on the back end of a lot of blowers, and because you've got that matte finish to it as well, it doesn't pick up grimy, grubby, greasy prints. Although every now and then you will notice bits of dust and other just general air muck clinging to it. And I really love how that camera bump is barely even a bump at all, and it's neatly integrated into the rest of the back. Beautifully seamless. So I've got to say, certainly from the arse end, the Moto G06 Power is a bit of a beaut. It's just a bit of a shame about the front end, really. And yes, that rear does come in a choice of posh Pantone colours. This right here is the Tapestry model, which is kind of a sultry aquamarine. And here in the UK, you can also grab the Moto G06 Power in this middle colour here, which is called Laurel Oak. And in the pictures looks a kind of slurry brown. Up front, you've got a bit of Gorilla Glass 3 protection for that display, which is pretty old school these days, though that said, Google still uses it for its Pixel Watch. It's not particularly drop resistant, you'll probably want to slap that condom case on just to be sure there's no pre-installed screen protector either. And this phone is also IP64 dust and splash resistant, so not many worries when it comes to small bits of grit, etc. But definitely don't go dropping it in water, otherwise it probably won't end well. Now, to unlock the Moto G06 Power, you've actually got an edge-mounted fingerprint sensor. It's built into that power button on the side there. It's not particularly happy if your hands are like sopping wet or anything, but besides that, seems to be loving life so far, reasonably responsive. And if you're struggling with this, you're wearing gloves or something like that, you do have Face Unlock as backup, which seems okay as long as the lighting isn't terrible. And once you're in there, you'll be enjoying a lovely bit of Android 15, not quite the latest, freshest version 16. And when/if it'll ever get Android 16, who knows, possibly never. And I wouldn't expect more than a couple of years of security patching for this thing either. So if you want a smartphone for the long haul, you might possibly want to look elsewhere. It is a mostly stock version of Android, complete with all the usual stuff, including a Discover feed, got your apps tray, of course, which is unfortunately laden with crapware. Most of this stuff I didn't install, random crappy games, Temu, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Booking.com. And what you unfortunately don't get slapped on the Moto G06 Power is Motorola's usually pretty decent suite of own apps beyond Moto Secure. Now, this adds quite a few decent bonus tools, including the likes of secure folders so you can properly lock away any private stuff, and the likes of the pin pad scramble as well, which can mix up those digits when you are typing in your pin in public so no crafty buggers can sneak a peek over your shoulder. But yeah, no smart connect or anything like that. Thankfully, you still get the excellent gesture support in here, including my firm favourite, bit of the old fast torch. There's no Moto AI shenanigans stuffed on here either, but plenty of other AI, including good old Perplexity. You got Copilot on here, and of course Google's own Gemini AI assistants. You're absolutely spoiled for choice. There's no support for eSIM, however, on the Moto G06 Power, which is a bit of a pain in the arsehole region if you do a lot of traveling, because it's just so convenient before you bugger off abroad to download an eSIM onto your smartphones. You know, as soon as you touch down, you can get straight on the internet, message people, etc. And here in the UK, the only storage option appears to be a measly 64 gigabytes. And between the system files and the apps, already used up more than half of that in just literally a couple of days. But the good news is you can at least expand that storage if you need to, and you will need to, believe me, by slipping a microSD memory card into that SIM tray. And thankfully it is a separate memory card slot from those dual physical SIM slots. Now, the Moto G06 Power sports a massive 6.88-inch LCD panel, and it heralds the return of our great mate, the nipple notch. Haven't seen much of this wee chap in a while. Of course, most modern smartphones come with a separate floating selfie cam orifice type affair. It doesn't really intrude too much into the action when you do go full screen in your games, movies, whatever. You've got an HD plus resolution, 1640 by 720. So not the crispest visuals around, especially given the size of this panel. But yeah, it's absolutely fine just for kicking back with some Netflix, YouTube, whatever. Unfortunately though, the brightness level does max out at approximately 600 nits. So outdoors on a sunny day, you might be squinting a bit trying to work out what's actually going on. The colours are reasonably poppy for an LCD panel, although the contrast, not fantastic, nothing compared to an OLED display, that's for sure. And the image does darken quite significantly when you tilt the phone slightly away from your face, but you do have the old nightlight feature, which filters out that pesky blue light for an easier, more comfortable on the eyeballs experience. And sadly, like all budget-friendly Motorola smartphones, there is bugger all always on display option here. You'll have to wake up this smartphone to see if you've got any notifications or anything waiting for you. The refresh does max out at 120 Hz, not that you'll get much chance to really enjoy that, as the UI, navigation and everything else, not exactly silky smooth, shall we say. But yeah, more on the performance in a little bit. And the Moto G06 Power does actually sport a stereo speaker setup, which I really wasn't expecting from a sub £100 budget smartphone, although having said that, let's just bump up the volume, see what we've got. Marco D says, your jokes are refreshing like warm beer. Well, as a self-affirmed alcoholic, I'm absolutely down with warm beer. It doesn't matter if it's warm, if it's frozen, if it comes in pill form. As long as it's boozy, I'll stick it in me. So fair play, those Moto G06 Power speakers are fairly loud when you max out the volume, loud enough so they can cut through some pretty bad background family rumblings. Although that said, definitely the bottom speaker is pulling the majority of the weight here compared with rather tinny earpiece speaker. Don't expect much bass or anything either, but again, perfectly fine if you're just knocking back with a few Uncle Spurt videos in your spare time. Because of course you wouldn't watch any of those other YouTubers, would you? Ugh. And good news for audio fans, because you do actually get a 3.5mm headphone jack slapped on that top edge. So you can get wired in to really enjoy some proper high quality audio. Now, performance is one of the areas where you can really tell the Moto G06 Power is a budget smartphone, because the overall experience, shall we say, can be rather juddery at times. As long as you've slapped your patient pants on though, it's not terrible. You know, apps don't take forever to load up, just a handful of seconds usually. You got the MediaTek Helio G81 Extreme in charge here. The use of the word extreme should be taken lightly, because on occasion, the Moto G06 Power can be slower than a two-legged tortoise carrying some particularly heavy shopping. And that's not really helped by the fact you've only got 4 measly gigs of RAM stuffed in here. Certainly in the model they're serving up here in Byyyeeeeee. So even with the RAM boost feature on, you can just tell that it's really struggling to keep track of everything when there are a few apps on the go. And I did see some other glitching on the Moto G06 Power, such as sometimes when streaming video, the picture would kind of knacker up and go all bulky. And if you are a gamer, frankly, I'd steer well clear of the Moto G06 Power. Even the most basic optimized fare like Call of Duty Mobile really struggles on this thing. The frame rate is inconsistent, the responsiveness is just far too sludgy. And while I realise I'm hardly the most capable of Call of Duty Mobile competitors, even I usually don't get my arse handed to me this thoroughly. You don't even get the usual Motorola gaming mode slapped on here, so yeah, bag of wank biscuits. But the real highlight of the Motorola G06 Power, besides of course the low price tag, is the excellent battery life. You've got a 7,000 mAh capacity cell stuffed inside of that chunky chassis. And as a result, even with buckets of screen on time, plenty of audio and video streaming, good bit of camera play, etc, you'll still get a full weekend of use out of a single charge of this thing. Like seriously, that battery drain is no more than a trickle. So if you do find you're on your phone a lot, just browsing the web, messaging, stuff like that, then you'll certainly enjoy the Moto G06 Power's prowess. Of course, when it is fully drained, you will need to basically be plugging it in overnight because you've got measly 18-watt wired charging support here. It does take a good wee while to fill back up again, and there's bugger all wireless charging support. Not really a shock given the cost. And so my lovelies, let's finish this wee squint at the Moto G06 Power by banging on about the old camera tech for a wee bit. And while it looks like a dual lens setup, that secondary lens must just be a depth sensor or something, because you've got a single 50 megapixel shooter on that back end. There's bugger all ultra wide angle support or anything, and that 2x zoom is your basic digital zoom. The camera app, pretty simple and straightforward, not much in the way of features. You've got your usual sort of simple selection of filters you can play around with. Jesus Christ, let's get it right off that for a start. You've got your Google lens, your flash, you can add a timer if you fancy. And you've got yourself a handful of bonus camera modes, including portrait mode, of course, and a dedicated pro mode. If you want to play around with the likes of the white balance, the ISO levels, the shutter speed. And again, because of that limited performance, the camera app can feel a little bit sludgy, especially if you're trying to take lots of photos in quick succession. Where you snap a portrait shot can sometimes take a while to process. You can certainly expect the occasional blurry pic when shooting a moving subject, and of course its low light capabilities less than stellar, but all the usual limitations when it comes to cameras on budget phones. As for your home movies, well, you can shoot full HD resolution video at 30 frames per second here on the Moto G06 Power. There is no 4K option, unsurprisingly, and no option to boost the frame rate to 60 frames per second either. And again, same limitations as with the photo capture, just shoot in broad daylight and hopefully it'll all turn out well. And last up, around the front end of the Moto G06 Power, you got yourself a basic 8 megapixel selfie shooter, which again you can use to record yourself at full HD resolution at 30 frames per second. It's perfectly fine for video chats. The audio pickup's decent as long as you don't speak in a low muffled voice or anything. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a delicious wee nutshell is the fresh new Moto G06 Power, a less than £100 smartphone that has some obvious limitations. The performance, pretty slow. Camera tech, quite basic, and you can expect pretty limited software support too. But hey, if you want a budget-friendly blower for browsing the web, messaging your mates, all that kind of stuff, and you want it to keep on going for a full weekend without needing a top-up on that battery, well, great news, it'll do the job. Anyway, that's what this weathered old YouTube tosspot reckons. What do you reckon of the Moto G06 Power? Are you tempted? Be great to hear your thoughts. I'm in the process of updating my best budget smartphones video guide, so hopefully that'll be going live in a week or two. So I just turned on the bloody torch, getting carried away as usual. Please do poke subscribe, ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers, everybody. Love you.